Howdy folks, meteorologist Matt Gray here. We've got another edition of the Brainstorm after a stormy Thursday across the inland northwest and lots of severe weather reports that we are continuing to watch and analyze. Some wind damage, some flooding, and yeah, even this, and this is a breaking development here, is that we had some funnel clouds spotted near the Hayden area. This one right about 3:45, and then another report here right around the Rathdrum Post Falls area. So we got a little bit of everything out of this storm, but you can see the vast majority of what is in these storm reports is power outages and wind damage with trees down and downed limbs and all sorts of other things. No, it took a couple limbs off of my trees, that's for sure. So what in the world happened here? Because not only did we get lots of storm damage and power outages and the like, but we also got quite a show as this storm was rolling in. You can see these kind of beautiful rolling structures here from on the West Plains of the National Weather Service office in Spokane. Lots of you sent us pictures of these clouds as they came in, this shelf cloud that kind of preceded all the rain and in some cases the wind as well. So what the heck is going on here? Well, let me show you, because what we saw on Thursday was a great example of a gust front. So when we look at thunderstorms, basically as they move through the atmosphere, they are going to be taking in that warm, moist air, that energy. And usually what happens here is you can see on this side of your screen, or on this side of your screen rather, that warm air rises up into these thunderstorms and creates them. But since the storm is moving, it's always kind of sucking in air or taking in air from from what's coming out ahead of it. Now, on the opposite side of that storm, especially when they become very strong, now you have some very quick cooling of the air, cool, dense air that rushes out of the thunderstorm along with the rain, and it can do so at very high speeds. And so that's what we call the downdraft. So we have the updraft and we have the downdraft, the warm air and the cool air. And all of this, of course, is moving. Those storms yesterday, Thursday, if you're watching this at a later date, was moving at about 30 miles an hour. And so what you get here is what we call a gust front, where that cool air is racing down, sometimes very, very fast. In the case of what we saw Thursday, it was 50, 60 miles an hour that it's racing out and actually getting out ahead of the main body of the storm. So usually the wind was showing up long before it ever started raining, while that warm air was rising up above it. And likely this is an explanation for what we saw with some of these funnel clouds that were reported as well, because right where that warm air and that cool air meets, that's where you get this turbulence. It starts out horizontal, but it can easily turn to the vertical. So things get a little swirly there. It's also why you see some of these cool little cloud structures on these shelf clouds as they come in with these gust fronts underneath them. Because you're getting that rolling in the atmosphere, you get some condensed water vapor and you have some very, very interesting clouds. So this is kind of how these storms, as they move, and this can happen for miles and miles at a time. Long-lived severe thunderstorms with dangerous winds. I had a situation where we had 60, 70 mile an hour winds over in Missoula, Montana, went up the Bitterroot Valley and had people out of power for about a week because of the extensive storm damage it did. And the winds showed up long before it ever started raining, before the full body of the storm came in, because the downdraft winds were so powerful that it was pushing that gust front much, much faster than the storms themselves were moving. And, you know, severe weather aside, it is quite beautiful to look at. Thanks to Carrie Fay for sending us this photo. And you can see kind of the examples of that turbulent underside of these clouds as that warm air is riding up right under the underside of those clouds, moving up into the storm, which is kind of back here somewhere if you can see my mouse cursor. So that air rising up this way already. Where she's taking this picture, she's in the cold air that's behind the gust front, so the worst of the winds have likely moved on, and they're kind of right out ahead of here. And you can even see some of these little scud clouds hanging below kind of the main shelf right here. And so that shows you that's air actually rising up, starting to condense, and then the air continues on its merry way. Another great example here, this is actually a picture I took in our office as the gust front was moving through. You can see kind of the tree looking a little bit sideways. You can see once again those underhanging structures from the air rushing up into the clouds above. And notice out in the background here, as you look towards downtown Spokane, you have got some dust. And that's a great indicator that you've got a gust front because all the dust is getting kicked up out ahead of it. And like I said, it was about another 10-15 minutes before it even started raining in downtown at the time that I took this picture. So before we leave you there, now that we've learned a little bit about gust fronts, I want to show you how this looks on our radar. We do still have our radar data here, and you can even see it as these storms develop, because look what happens here. You can see how they all of a sudden, as they begin to collapse right over Spokane, they start racing ahead. That's that gust front that sometimes we call it outflow in weaker storms, but it's just hanging on to what was left of the energy of those storms as it raced off into central Washington. And in fact, a lot of folks were able to see it, even though they didn't get much in the way of rain. Now, if we flip over to kind of our radar winds, and you can see those very bright colors, that, friends, is the winds inside the storm and eventually what becomes the gust front. And so you can kind of see what happens here is as these storms coalesce together right over Rathdrum. There was a good storm, the one where we actually saw that funnel cloud. You can see how the winds and those bright colors just sweep across the area, and then they're out of here fairly quickly. Once they pass the radar, though, it becomes really evident where that gust front is. I mean, I don't really even have to draw it here. You can pick it out really, really quickly. Really, really easily. And that's all that cool air that is rushing down from these big, tall thunderstorms. And this is the type of wind, what we call straight line winds, not from tornadoes, that can cause some serious, serious damage. And certainly have proven to do that many times around the inland Northwest. I'll switch over to another one. So this kind of takes out kind of the regular flow of the wind. This allows what we look for when we look for signs of tornadic activity. Let me clear this here. And I will show you, because there is at least a little bit of a hint of rotation where we saw, or where we got the reports of that funnel cloud, kind of right around the Coeur d'Alene Airport in between Hayden and Rathdrum. So you can see some areas kind of moving opposite direction, right? So you've got this area. This is all moving this way, all these areas in red. So this is air that's running up into these thunderstorms that are about to come off of the mountains right here. And then you have this little area where it's moving this way. So air moving this way, air moving this way. Well, all of a sudden you got a little bit of rotation there. So when you look at this in real time, you go, oh, okay, I'll keep an eye on that. But it doesn't really stick out like a sore thumb, not like the really severe thunderstorms out in, say, the Plains states. That's one of the reasons why here, and this is only for like one frame as well. We talked about this with these tornadoes that we saw last May in the Spokane area. It happens so quickly, and sometimes it doesn't really stick out all that much. You know, these are not super bright colors, but certainly a funnel cloud that could have even perhaps become a tornado. And, well, sometimes, unfortunately, the types of tornadoes we get around here, they are not very easy to spot, and the same goes for funnel clouds. So yeah, really interesting kind of stuff that we were able to take a look at here with this storm. Hope you learned a little bit about gust fronts and why we see some of these really cool looking cloud formations in some of these thunderstorms. Hopefully you didn't see damage or had the power out at your house. And well, we've had a pretty interesting start here to storm season in the inland Northwest. We'll see how long it goes before we dry out and get into fire season. But that's a story for another day. In the meantime, thanks for watching this episode of The Brainstorm. Give us a like and subscribe on our 4 News Now YouTube channel. Keep on watching us on KXLY Plus. You can subscribe to my Brainstorm newsletter on KXLY.com. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you again soon.